morning and welcome to the great city of North Miami Beach. My name is McKenzie Fleurimond, one of your city commissioners here, and I am the liaison to the Economic Development Board. And today we're having a housing workshop, and we're going to talk about some of the most important things to know when it's time to purchase a home. Many of you I know have been asking questions about purchasing your first property, or perhaps you're interested in purchasing an investment property. A lot of you guys are looking at the city of North Miami Beach in particular and wondering, how do I become part of such a great city with so much going on? What are the schools like? How much do the properties cost? And what does it take to buy a home in North Miami Beach and the surrounding areas? So we've heard your questions, and today we have answers. Today joining me are two gentlemen with the expertise necessary to discuss the topic of purchasing a property and real estate. As we know, the market is a very interesting place right now. Properties and their values are going up. People are renting and want to purchase a home, and they want to know exactly what to do, and so we have those answers. Today joining us is Nathaniel Crawford, who's part of Amazing Soflo Properties. He has a lot of experience and is one of the top real estate agents in South Florida. We also have with us today Mr. Danny Felton, who is the NID manager for a housing and counseling organization here in South Florida. And he's going to also talk to us about some of the important things that you need to know when purchasing a property. Gentlemen, good morning. Let's start with you, Mr. Felton. Go ahead and introduce yourself. I hope I did a pretty good job of saying who you are. Yes. All right, so if you can go into details, tell us about yourself and what it is that you do.
Yes, Commissioner. Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Danny Felton, and I'm the branch manager of NID Housing Counseling Agency. NID Housing Counseling Agency is the largest minority housing counseling HUD intermediary in the country. We have over 52 branches in 22 states. And our focus is to create home ownership for everyone. We focus on the underserved communities, and I'm glad to be here today to share my information as to the things that we provide as it relates to educating consumers on wealth, gaining wealth in home ownership. Having served as the local president of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, and now currently serving as the third vice president of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, which basically is the oldest real estate trade organization in the country, formed in 1947. Wow. And the purpose of this organization was a fair housing organization to fight the disparities as it relates to home ownership and fair housing. So our motto is creating democracy in housing. So I'm glad to be here today to share this information and to our community as well as to the individuals watching this video. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Felton. And you touched on some great points, which we're going to go over today, which is some of the housing disparities that we have, especially in our minority communities. And also we have with us Mr. Nathaniel Crawford. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Glad to
and
be here.
You're with Amazing Soflo Properties, but you have also experience in development and investment properties as well, right?
Yes.
Tell us about
absolutely.
yourself.
So I am a South Florida native.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Grew up in South Miami, the Richmond Heights area. Well, grew up between there and South Atlanta. Been here for a very long time, and I've watched a lot of the changes in the community. And since I've been a full-time real estate broker, about 10 years now, a lot of those changes, I'm very sensitive and very aware to how disproportionately communities of color are affected, especially in markets like the one we're in right now. You know, as properties go up in value and interest gets peaked in many of our communities, a lot of times we don't have the education or the access to benefit in these big upswings in the market. So conversations like this allow us to share that information so people are aware and empowered so that we can make a meaningful impact and have a meaningful level of engagement in the real estate activities in our communities.
Very good points that you made as well, Mr. Crawford, because what we're experiencing right now, especially in South Florida, is I would say a seller's market, right? And one of the concerns that we have, especially here in Miami-Dade County, is gentrification, right?
Yes.
And what I see is happening is that when we have upswings in the market like this, a lot of people who own properties in minority communities are being offered very high prices and high numbers for their homes, and some of them are taking those offers and leaving their communities, which is kind of changing the structure of our communities, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think there are two scenarios that are prevalent, specifically in low to middle income communities. One of them is exactly what you just articulated, which is people who are listing their homes for sale and getting incredible amounts of money for them because of just the amount of interest that's there. One of the other scenarios, and unfortunately I think it's a little more popular in our communities, is where off-market properties, people are receiving letters and other communications offering them essentially pennies on the dollar
Right.
for their homes, and because they don't know whether these are estate sales or families who have been in transition, or maybe just people who are in a tight financial bind because of the way the pandemic has affected them, people are selling homes for a fraction of what they should be sold for, simply because they don't know.
Right.
You know, Big Mama gets a letter in the mail for $50,000. She needs some money, not knowing that her home is worth $250,000. So part of what we want to be mindful of and use our resources as effectively and efficiently as possible is to make sure that people understand not only the activity that's going on in the market, but how it relates to their specific situation. So if you're in need of capital, maybe a refinance is a better option than selling.
Right.
Or maybe you do sell, but if you want to sell, making sure that you're getting market value for your property.
Right.
And if you're not getting market value, you're aware of that.
Right.
Not letting someone take advantage of your ignorance of the market so that they can then come in and build a new house.
Right.
And further gentrify the community.
Correct,
So
correct.
I don't believe it's necessarily a question of stopping gentrification as much as it is a question of very close management
Right.
of that gentrification. When the people are coming into the community, every community has a certain amount of turnover. What we want to make sure is that turnover does not change the culture and character of the community.
Right. Mr. Felton, if you can talk to us about the importance of home ownership and what we're seeing in our community as far as the disparities when it comes to minority communities. And also, what is the first thing someone should think about when they want to purchase a property for the first time?
That's a great question. So when we talk about home ownership is the cornerstone to a strong community, first of all. And the greatest accumulation of wealth especially in communities of color, has been retained or gained through home ownership. So a lot of people, one of the advantages of working with the housing counseling agency is a lot of people feel as though they could not own a home.
Right.
There were so many barriers. Maybe I
Right.
don't make enough money, or maybe I want a fixed income. But the truth of the matter is homeownership is achievable for everyone.
Right.
And so there's certain steps that must be taken. There's programs, processes, and products available that we are here to educate the consumer on. So I would say as a housing counseling agency, it's very important that a homeowner attends a first-time homebuyer workshop. And that workshop is designed to educate the homeowner on the 10 steps to home ownership, just as far as looking at their credit. Many people have not even, had an opportunity to view their credit, wherein there's laws that are put in place with the Fair Credit Act that allows borrowers to look at their credit free of charge. And so as we go through this period of not thinking that we can own a home, we don't know what steps to take, there's this fear that sets in. And so as a housing counseling agency, we're here to provide free home buyer education workshops to consumers, allow them to look at their credit, allow them to, dispute the things that are on their credit, to put themselves in position to be able to own a home. And then the other thing we do is we actually do what's called an affordability study. That affordability study is where we look at their income, we look at their debts, we calculate debt-to-income ratio. We actually teach them not to buy what they qualify for, but to buy what they can afford. Because
Right.
there's a difference in that. A lot of times you will meet with the lender, that lender will run numbers, and based upon the market right now, there's this demand that we have to buy this $350,000 home or $400,000 home, or we can't purchase a home. However, we don't want the payment that comes along with that. So when we talk about buying what you qualify for versus buying what you can afford, we actually itemize the actual expenses that a person has, whether it's the insurance, the car insurance doesn't appear on your credit report. You know, the child care doesn't appear on the credit report, the light bill, the grocery bill. There's certain expenses that are reoccurring in a household that a borrower sometimes don't take into effect because they want the house so bad.
Wow.
You know, and so with that, we're able to put things in perspective, you know, have them to keep their feet on the ground and not figure that, hey, you know what, I got to get this house and be in a situation where I got what I wanted, but I lost what I had in terms of peace of mind.
Now you make a very valid point about debt to income ratio. And a lot of people don't calculate some of those other bills that you're referencing because they're recurring bills. Mm-hmm. And so when the mortgage company is looking to qualify you for a mortgage, don't take those bills like groceries and gas and car insurance into consideration, is what you're saying. Now, when it comes to how much house someone can afford, with this market the way it is now, would you say that this is the best time for someone to purchase? Or would you say that there is ever a good time for someone to purchase versus another?
Well, my immediate response would be it's always a good time to purchase real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about debt to income ratio, other things that lenders don't take into effect, or should I say a consumer don't take into, a home buyer don't take into effect, is that you're being qualified based upon your gross income.
Right.
And we all know we don't take home the gross, right? You know, everyone has a part, takes a part of that. So when we look at debt to income ratio, you have a front end ratio and you have a back end ratio. That front end ratio is basically your housing expense ratio. And basically what that represents, 31%, it says that your mortgage payment should not represent more than 1/3 of your gross monthly income. However, I'm seeing situations where borrowers, you know, are having their front end ratio at 38% and, you know, 40% just to be able to achieve this goal of home ownership. And so when we look at, is it the right time to purchase? Well, that's where a lot of times you have to do your research. Mm-hmm. Because certain cities, certain counties, there's certain programs that are available that will help you with down payment assistance, that will help you with principal reduction. So I encourage consumers to do the research in terms of wherever you're looking to purchase. See what programs are available. You know, as it relates to, you know, are there county exclusive programs? Are there city programs? Are there entitlement city programs that will help offset the cost of me now, hey, I qualify for $250,000, but every house that I look at is about $325,000, where there's a gap of about $50,000. How do we bridge that gap? And so that's where it's going to take public-private partnerships to get involved to say, hey, how do we keep our communities to keep the same color that they have? You know, because our communities are changing colors, just keeping it real. Because we are being priced out of this market, as you related, as you spoke in terms of gentrification, and we're losing sight on the value and the equity that we have, where we're looking at the capital that we're going to gain in our hands.
Well, that's a very good point that you bring up, because our communities are very diverse. And there's something about South Florida that makes it what it is. And that's the fact that it's a melting pot. And so when we start to shift communities, experiences start to change. And value begins to change, right? And so, you know, making sure that there's a place for people who want to be able to participate in this economy is something that's very important. And it's very important to me as well, which is one of the reasons why we're having this conversation. But you brought up a very good point about programs that are available for people who would like to purchase property. Now, are you seeing that people have to participate in particular education prior to them receiving those funds? Are those requirements for receiving those types of funds from counties, et cetera, based on your experience?
Yes, most of the programs that are provided for first-time home buyers, whether it's through the Community Development Block Grant or whether it's through some type of surtax or SHIP funding, it's certain requirements. There's income and family size requirements. In addition to that, there's certain requirements in terms of owner occupancy, as well as the fact that you must complete an 8-hour HUD-approved housing counseling course. And that's what we've been here. We've been providing this course here in South Florida since 2004. And with this course, we offer it in English, Spanish, and in Creole.
Right.
You know, and so with that, it allows a buyer to understand the process. We have different industry professionals to come in, and we talk about the role of the real estate agent. We talk about the home inspector. We have a person from Hope Inc. to come in and talk about fair housing. And we talk about the title company and the closing agent. So we cover the insurances and understanding what that declaration page means versus just, I'm just getting insurance because it's the cheapest one. But my deductible is so high that it's really not beneficial to me as a homeowner. So that's where this home buyer education workshop becomes a part of an individual that's looking to get down payment assistance, becomes so vital.
Okay, well, very valid points, Mr. Felton. I want to, first of all, so Mr. Felton is very clear. Education is key. So if you're going to purchase a property, you need to make sure that you get educated first, right? So you need to make sure that you tap into your resources to know what the process is. We're going to segue into purchasing a property through lease options, okay? I know that we had a very interesting conversation, Mr. Crawford, about lease options and how they work and what the difference is between terms and actually having a contract and options to buy. Because a lot of people who may not be ready as far as credit or as far as financing is concerned may feel like a lease option is a way for them to get closer to the dream of home ownership. Talk to us about your experience with lease options. What are the pluses? What are the minuses? What do we have to be mindful of when thinking about lease options?
Yeah. Well, one of the first things when it comes to that is to sort of echo what Mr. Felton said, is education is the key. So, but not just from your personal perspective. You want to make sure you're working with professionals who are educated too.
Correct.
Because you're essentially putting your home ownership future in their hands. So you're at the mercy of the limits of their education and their resources. So understanding that you need to know things, but you also need to surround yourself with professionals that know things and have access to those resources. When it comes to contracts, to lease options, understanding that, well, I have a lease option. Well, am I the only person with the option on this lease, or does the landlord have an option as well?
Tell us a little bit about what the lease option is for the layman who may not know what a lease option is.
Well, there are a couple different variations, but the gist of it in most cases is that you are renting a property for a specifically predefined period of time, and a portion of that rent goes towards your down payment based on some predetermined closing date. So maybe you plan on buying it after 1 year, you plan on buying it after 2 years, and 10% of your monthly rent goes towards that down payment. There are some, I've seen a couple different companies where they actually give you the option to buy, and then at the end of your rental period, if you don't buy, you get most of that money back minus a service fee of some sort. So that's the sort of the gist of it. And to answer your question about when it's a good option and when it's a bad option, what we're seeing in South Florida right now is there are a lot of people who are entertaining the rent-to-own option because there are companies that will buy the home in cash. And being a cash buyer in the way the market is right now gives you a lot more buying power.
Right.
Something you have to be mindful of there is that debt-to-income ratio, because working with that rent-to-own company is going to raise your payment and also raise the cost of the home in the future.
So you're saying that there's companies out there that will actually purchase the home,
Yes.
and then you can rent it for a certain amount of time before buying it from that company.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So
okay.
and that gives, and they purchase the home in cash. So
Right.
if you're in a market where you have a real estate professional that you're working with, most of these companies still work with you and your real estate agent that understands the area. So you're able to purchase this home, just for the sake of example, let's say you find a $250,000 home, rent-to-own company is going to buy that $250,000 home for you and then sell it back to you at $275,000, a year from now, 2 years from now. Making sure that you know through your real estate professional that $250,000 is what that home is really worth, so that you don't get to next year to buy it at $270,000 and you really should have bought it. It wasn't worth that. It was worth $200,000. So now you're upside down, and you fell in love with this home. Your kids are going to school here now, and you can't by it. So understanding the nature of the market, are the prices in those communities rising that fast? And then being able to take that information and translate it into, is this somewhere that I want to be?
So do you believe that when someone is getting into a lease option to buy, or in any real estate transaction, that they should always have their own realtor, or should they allow the realtor of the company or the buyer to handle the full transaction?
I am always a proponent of you should have someone representing your interests in any transaction. If they are not representing you, if they don't have a fiduciary responsibility to you, they're working for someone else. And if that's the case, then your financial future is at risk.
Are realtors allowed to represent both sides of a transaction?
They can in the state of Florida. I believe they come into transactions as what's called transaction brokers. What I generally suggest is to have that conversation with your agent to say, hey, I know we're working together here, but if you find another property from me that's off the market, how does that work?
Right.
And if I think a lot of times it's a question of character. We just got good, upstanding agents that are going to make sure everybody gets a fair shake here,
right?
And a disclosure of information. When we're talking about appraisals and inspections and stuff like that, there's nothing inherently wrong with an agent being able to broker both sides of a transaction,
right,
so long as that brokering is done in a very transparent way. The problem is if broker says, well, I know my seller has this group of concerns over here, and my buyer has these interests over here, and I'm gonna play those against each other. So that's not what you want. It's not my goal to get the biggest check. It's my goal to make the most meaningful impact on all the parties involved, so that everybody achieves their real estate goals.
So your suggestion would be
To
the
always
best route
have
is to have your own
representing
agent
yourself,
representing
yes.
you. Okay,
So-
perfect.
Now,
Perfect.
there will be scenarios if you have, especially when you're dealing with agents who have history in a community or somewhere, because they may know off-market properties. So in those off-market properties, or they may have a lot of listings. So there are going to be scenarios where you will have an agent who ends up on both sides of that transaction. But if you're actively looking for properties, I would strongly suggest, before you just go look at properties, don't just go out dealing with every listing agent you can find. Find a good agent that you have interviewed, you've had conversations with, you've checked references on, and you trust, you have a rapport with them that they're going to look out for your best interest. And then from there, then you begin your home search.
Mr. Crawford, great information on what you need when purchasing your first property, especially if you're looking into a lease with an option to purchase. As well, it's important to make sure that you have your own realtor representing you in any real estate transaction. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about appraisals, we're going to talk about the market, and we're going to talk about some more resources that you need when purchasing your first home in a short minute. Welcome back, everybody. Once again, my name is McKenzie Fleurimond, one of your commissioners in the great city of North Miami Beach. And again, thank you to our Mayor and Commission and all of our staff here at the great city of North Miami Beach. And so as promised, we're going to segue into appraisals, property value, and also some of the extra steps that you need to know about when purchasing your first property. And I want to start with you, Mr. Felton. Let's talk about the credit process, because we know a lot of people are fearful because of where their credit may be, and they believe that they don't qualify to get into the housing market. So talk to us a bit about credit.
Yeah, it's interesting. When we talk about credit, a lot of times borrowers, they don't understand that there's 3 credit bureaus. So you have Equifax, you have TransUnion, and Experian. And most lenders will go off of the middle credit score. And so you have borrowers, a lot of times they have Credit Karma and all these other sites that provide monitoring scores, which is not really the score. So it's very important that they're able to meet with the counselor, that they can see all 3 credit bureau scores. And one of the interesting things about when we pull the credit, it's a soft pull. So it doesn't impact the credit score. So they're able to, in addition to review their credit and discuss the issues that are in front of them as it relates to their credit, but they're also able to see what scores the lenders are actually looking at as it relates to their Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian score. And the interesting thing is when they're qualifying for a loan, you have lenders that have products that will go as low as a 580 score. So that's a good thing as it relates to a borrower not feeling as though they don't have the 800 credit score. They don't have the 700 credit score. There's programs and products that could be available to allow them to accomplish homeownership.
So when it comes to a 580 credit score, are we looking at a higher interest rate? The way that particular loan would be structured, how is it different than someone, let's say, with a 700 credit score?
Well, it's called access. You know what I mean? And so when we look at credit scores, the credit is your credibility.
Right.
Right? And so that shows your past performance. It actually shows who's granted you credit, how you've paid back that credit, do you have any judgments, collections, charge-offs, anything in public records. So when you have a 700 credit score, you pretty much can write your ticket as it relates to lending. Keep in mind there's an issue, there's a debt to income factor that goes into that as well. So where you have an individual where FHA will allow as low as a 580 credit score, and then you have mortgage insurance, the factor that really plays a part in your actual mortgage payment is that private mortgage insurance. Both loans, whether it's an FHA or a conventional loan, your credit score will play a part in it, but that mortgage insurance is what the risk is tied to. So you may have a loan where you're able to get an FHA rate today at, I don't know, just for example, let's say 3.5%. You get a conventional loan at, let's just say, the same 3.5%. However, on an FHA loan, the mortgage insurance is set. There's a set premium for FHA loans.
Right.
Wherein on a conventional loan, the mortgage insurance is based upon your risk factor, your down payment, your credit score. So therein it lies the question of which loan is better. And so that all depends upon the borrower's total situation as it relates to their 4 C's.
Okay, very interesting point that you bring up about insurance. And I want to dive into that a little bit. Because for most people, they may think that with insurance, it's all about the physical property itself, either burning down or something happening to the physical property, and that's when the insurance would pay the bank for probably a property that's been a total loss. So explain to us, there's the private mortgage insurance, and then there's the homeowner's insurance. Is that 2 different things? Is that what you're saying?
They're totally 2 different things.
Okay, talk to us about that.
When we talk about an actual monthly mortgage payment, right? Your mortgage payment consists of your principal, which is the money that the bank loans you, the interest, which is the money that the bank earns, the taxes, which is your tax payment, which is broken up into 1/12 payment. It's broken up into 12 payments, and then your insurances. Right?
More than one.
More than one, right?
Okay.
So we're talking about homeowners insurance. If you live east of I-95, you're talking about windstorm insurance.
Right.
If you live in a flood zone, you're talking about flood insurance. In addition to that, you're talking about the mortgage insurance, which is something that protects the lender's risk. Not necessarily, it doesn't benefit you at all. It just benefits the lender because you're putting less than the 20% requirement that a normal conventional conforming loan was set for.
Wow. So with PITI, the I should have an apostrophe and S
Great point.
next to it. Okay, so there's more than one insurance, guys. So it's not just your insurance if something happens to your property. It's about your risk factors. So the higher of a risk you are, the more that you'll pay for the private mortgage insurance.
Correct.
Okay, wow. Okay, Mr. Crawford, let's talk about an appraisal. Because we know when people want to purchase properties, they have a purchase price that they agree on. So help us understand how people come to determine what their sell price would be versus what the buyer will pay for the actual property.
Well, the sell price should be determined by a realtor or someone pulling comparable properties in the area.
Right.
Then what's sold in the area, and
Right.
then basing your property price based on how quickly you want to sell it or what return you want on that property. Very often we're seeing right now that the sale prices just get pulled out of thin air. I want $500,000 for my property. Why? Because everyone's selling so fast. Which can be very dangerous for a number of reasons. If you're in very hot areas, one of the challenges is that then pulls up the comparable sales in the area to what may be a questionable level. Banks or any lender is going to send out a professional appraiser, and that appraiser is going to do exactly that, see comparable properties in the area and come up with the value of this particular property based on those comparable sales in the area.
Right.
One of the points that come up for debate in very hot seller markets is that if there's so much activity in a very specific area that properties get pushed up to inflated values by inflated sales in the area.
Right.
So you end up with people who are buying homes that may in fact appraise, but 2, 3, 4 years from now won't appraise at that same value when the market sort of turns the corner. So in scenarios like that, you want to be very, very sensitive to the timing of your purchase, the reason for your purchase. If you're buying what I would consider a forever home, then you may have a little bit of higher tolerance for paying something that's a little closer to the top of the market because you're going to be here for 10, 20, 30 years.
Right.
This is going to be your home. But if you're buying based on the schools, because you want your son to go to this high school or your daughter to go to this private school or something like that, where you're only going to be here for a couple years, then you may be putting yourself in a challenging position if you're purchasing a home based on these really, really high comps. And then when the market turns the corner, you have the potential to be upside down in the house.
Very good. Very, very, very good point. So the appraiser comes out and they look at your property and they compare it to similar properties in the area. So if you're trying to purchase a property that has 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, they look at other properties in the area that have 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms and see what they've sold for.
Correct.
And if your house is in similar condition, chances are you're going to get a value, an appraised value around that same number.
Yes.
Okay.
And this sort of, to tie this back to what we talked about with the lease to own scenario, is one of the reasons that you want to make sure that you're working with an educated realtor in those scenarios, is that what we're seeing now is many of these rent-to-own companies are not local companies.
Right.
So they're Silicon Valley startups or they're based somewhere else. So they are doing what would be referred to as a desktop appraisal, meaning that somebody in a very far away place goes on Zillow or some other place and looks at sales on a piece of paper or on a website and then bases their assessment of this property on that information. So they're not familiar with the area. They don't know the schools. They don't know any of the other contributing factors. They don't know if it floods. They don't know those things. They just see sales numbers.
Right.
So making sure that you have a realtor or a professional in your corner so that when that number comes back from the desktop appraisal for this rent-to-own company, that you can show that to your realtor and say, hey, this is what they say the house is worth today. and based on this value, this is what I'll be buying it for a year from now. Is today's value accurate? Is the value that they came up with today okay? So understanding that, because they're not there, so they don't know the construction type and all the other things that may be going on in the community. If you're looking at somewhere, say, Little Haiti, where we're seeing a lot of climate gentrification. So a lot of people are coming there because of the high elevation on the land, so prices are going up even faster. They were already going up fast. Now they're going up even faster. So a desktop appraisal would put something really high to outside looking in, not understanding what the influencing is going on there. So being able to have that knowledge so that you're making sure the number that you're getting is very accurate in the rent to own space. In this traditional purchase place, it's the same scenario. The bank is going to send somebody out though. They're going to actually come and check the crawl space and check the foundation and all these other things to verify that square footage. And then they're going to then compare that to other properties in the area and then add or discount, based on the smaller sizes or larger sizes. Does it have a pool? Things of that nature. So you want to make sure whomever you're working with, though, in those scenarios, this ties back to the education. We're going to keep coming back to that. That's going to be the theme here.
Critical.
Is that you understand what's going on and the people whom you're depending on understand what's going on. So it's not just a question of you understanding that process. It's you understanding that process and everybody on your team understanding. Your mortgage broker, your real estate agent, the inspector that comes out. Because all of these people are people that the appraiser is going to come out and he works for the bank. He has no interest, as they would say, he doesn't have a dog in the fight. It's not his goal. So he's supposed to be objective. But if there's no one to verify his objectivity or his incompetence in some cases, to say, hey man, that's wrong. You shouldn't be using comps that are 2 miles away for this house. But if no one knows that, then you are the person, as the buyer, you're the person that pays the price for this. One of the things that I say over and over to buyers all the time, nobody gets paid until you close on your home. All of these people work for you. Their goal is to get you in a house. And because of that, you want to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do, not just sort of halfway doing it to sort of get the process along. So you should never be at any point in your transaction where you're scared to ask a question. If you're concerned about something, I've had clients stop closings, push them back 24 hours. Why? Because there was a line in the mortgage documents that they didn't understand. Well, I'm not going to sign this until somebody can explain that to me. And if there's nobody here that can explain it to me, then we can wait till tomorrow when we can get somebody to explain it to me. That is something I can't overemphasize, especially in the market right now, where we're really hot and there's a lot of people that have very big incentives to push you along. Don't let anyone strong arm you into buying a house just because you signed the process. So don't sign anything you don't understand. And if you don't understand it, make sure that there are people around you that you're comfortable asking, hey, can you explain this to me? We often have a tendency, because there's so much information and people knowingly or unknowingly sometimes will have a tendency, well, you don't know what that means? You don't want to be apprehensive about saying, well, no, I don't. Because this is your home. After you close on this property, all these other people are going to go away. And you have to live here for the next 10, 20, 30 years. You're going to be paying that mortgage. And if you're paying on that education is the key. So I know there's a long
very good answer. Very good answer. I wanted to actually, based on what you both said, talk about assuming of mortgages. Have you guys seen an uptick in people assuming mortgages of, let's say, their parents? Because we know a lot of people who, especially in Miami-Dade County, with the median income being about, median household income being about a little over $50,000, that perhaps retirement planning and things of that sort may have not been priority for a lot of households. Are you seeing a lot of children taking over their parents' mortgages as their way of purchasing a home for the first time? And have you seen parents selling properties to children, or multi-generational households where you have grandmother and grandfather living in the house with their children in order to save money. Have you seen that as an economic indicator of what's happening in Miami-Dade County?
Well, I haven't seen a lot of the assumption happening now, simply because when you'll see individuals assuming mortgages when interest rates are high.
Right.
And so the benefit of that is they're able to assume the actual lower interest rate.
Okay.
Wherein in today's market, rates are at an all-time low.
Correct.
So a borrower getting a new mortgage, in most cases, will probably play to their benefit because the interest rate will be less.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the wealth transfer
Mm-hmm.
or generational wealth,
Mm-hmm.
situation, I'm seeing a lot of that,
Mm-hmm.
where you have an heir or
Mm-hmm.
a parent that actually owned a home because they came through a specific area where home ownership was like,
Mm-hmm.
during that area where fair housing had just transformed and, transitioned, and then here is an opportunity that I'm able to buy a home. And so, like my dad, for example, his thing was to buy a home and to pay it off, so here he is, 87 years old, having a house paid off is fine, but at this point, it's a matter of enjoying my latter years.
Right,
And
right.
so how do I transform that, or how do I pass that on to the next generation? And so what they're looking for now is, what I'm seeing is they want to in some cases, retain the property. But in some cases, you have the heirs that don't want to go back to the communities that the homes are in. But in terms of retaining the property, there are situations such as a reverse mortgage. There's other situations as it relates to maybe giving a gift of equity, or there's some situations where they'll do an equity line.
Right.
So the parents could be able to have some form of resources, and when something happens to the, when we talk about estate planning, when that parent can put something in place that when something happens to him, that property doesn't have to go through this probate situation where the equity is now being able to be transferred by someone else. So it's allowing the property to stay within the family, keep that wealth that's been created by the parent into the family. So that's sort of what I'm seeing more of versus the assumption
Of the mortgage.
Very
Very good information that you gave about credit, number one, and also the wealth transfer, which is very important. Because a lot of parents are getting into retirement age. Some parents don't have retirement, so children are taking over their property for that reason. Or some of them are just in a position where they want to enjoy their retirement, but find a way to assure that the property stays in the family. So some great key points here about wealth transfer and about your credit. Remember, credit is very important. And so you want to make sure you monitor that. I think one of the things that I'm getting from this conversation, gentlemen, is that most of the work is done ahead of purchasing the property. I know a lot of people go window shopping when it comes to properties. They drive through neighborhoods. We've all done it. You drive through beautiful neighborhoods and you're like, that's the house I want. But we spend more time window shopping than we do getting prepared to make the purchase. So we talked about taking the classes, getting the education. We talked about the importance of credit, the importance of having the right professionals around you. And we even talked about the appraisal, the price for the property, the insurance or insurances, your debt to income, lease options, right? And so now you're at the closing table. You've come to an agreement on the price. You qualify for the mortgage, and so now you own the property, right? Now let's talk about what happens once you own the property. You have taxes that you have to pay. Now, do people pay their taxes through their mortgage, or do they pay their taxes on a yearly basis? Do you have an option? How does that work?
Generally, they're rolled into your payment.
Your payment, okay.
That was one of the things that Mr. Felton sort of alluded to
Right.
when talking about your payment.
Right.
In the off situation, because they're in South Florida, we have a unique lending environment a lot of times. So the short answer to your question is yes, but there are I've seen some creative financing products for foreign nationals or investors or stuff like that, where you're responsible for those taxes outside of that. So that's one of those things where you want to be educated on sort of what you're getting into.
Right.
But what you're responsible for, outside of your payment and what your payment includes before you get to the closing table, ideally. So you're not just signing stuff. But as a rule of thumb, that would be included in and put in the escrow.
Right. And I know people have to think about, from a municipal perspective, as an elected official, I know that you're responsible for paying the water bill. You're also responsible for paying for garbage pickup. And there are certain fees that are associated with living in certain communities. So if you're part of a homeowners association, there's fees associated with that as well.
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit about homeowners associations, things that they permit versus things they don't permit, and the role of paying your water bill and your taxes as well as your garbage.
Absolutely,
pickup.
absolutely. Well, part of the title company who handles your closing is going to make sure that there's no outstanding water bills or trash pickup and stuff like that.
Or liens.
Or liens, yes.
Okay.
One of the interesting things about when it comes to homeowners association, there are a lot of really good things from homeowners association. When it talks about keeping property values up and maintaining properties, but there are also places where homeowners associations or mandatory membership communities have been used strategically to keep certain groups of people out. So there are, and sometimes that's racism, sometimes that's classism, and there are a bunch of different opinions on that. But we often see when you're window shopping, if you go on Zillow and you find this beautiful home in Boca Raton and it's 5,000 square feet, and they only want $200,000 for it. And you're like, this is great, until you realize, well, there's a membership that comes with that's required, and it's another $85,000.
Right.
And that $85,000 cannot be rolled into your loan. So you have to come to closing with $85,000. So one of the things to be mindful of when you're house shopping is that. Because you don't want to look in communities, especially, and we see a lot of this, and there are not a lot of them that I've come across in Miami-Dade, but you see a lot of them in North Broward and Palm Beach counties, where they have these big, beautiful golf communities. There are a couple on the islands and the beaches here in Dade County, where there are associations fees that would be more than your mortgage. And if no one's telling you that, just because you have, as was spoken about earlier, on paper you can afford it on your gross income, but your net doesn't give you the money to be able to pay $1,100 on a maintenance fee or association fee on top of your $1,100 mortgage. So there's a lot to be said for just being aware of what's in that community and what those association dues cover, because there may be scenarios where I've seen scenarios where you're buying a single family home, but it's governed by, or structurally what looks like a single family home, but it's governed by a condo association.
Right.
And that condo association, your maintenance to that condo association covers things that would normally have to be paid by you if it was truly a single family home. So roof, exterior of the home, insurance, flood, all these things. But if you're in a condo association, those aren't fees that have to come out of your pocket. Those are fees that are covered in your association fees, which would also make that association fee a little higher than normal. So while it may at first glance scare you off, because like, whoa, man, I don't want to pay $800 in association dues, understanding what's included in those association dues is where you can really find out what's going on. And that's to where we keep coming back to the same thing. That's where the education is the key. So when you know the right questions to ask when associating, when thinking, what homeowners association, what does that cover? Is there a condo association? Okay, is there a mandatory membership, or is that membership optional? I see that it's on the golf course community. There are a lot of communities here that have restaurants on site, and part of your fee means you get a credit to eat at the restaurant every
Right.
month.
Right.
So that might not seem like a big deal to some people, but if you're a senior and you're on a fixed income, hey, having an extra $200 for dinner, that might be something.
You also want to make sure you play some golf too, because you don't want to pay that money if you're not gonna play the sport. So you're paying to maintain something that you may not use.
Exactly. Well, and then when it comes to resale value, you want to make sure that you're not. There very often you see this a lot with condos, where the banks foreclose on condos, and they can't sell the condo because of the association fee, because of
Right.
the mandatory membership. So
Right.
they end up essentially giving away the condo because whoever's buying it is just paying the association fee or the membership fee when they move in. So understanding what you're buying, because again, if you're not buying, the caveat, you know, I treat buying homes a lot like, you know, when you talk about people getting in relationships, you know, you sort of say true love, we set that aside, and then we talk about all these other things. I say your forever home is one scenario, because there's a certain different criteria that you're going to measure to when you're looking at a home that you plan on being in literally for the rest of your life, versus this is my home right now. And once you have a clear understanding on those things, and that's something that a real estate professional, your real estate agent should ask you,
Right.
well, why are we buying? Why
Right.
are we buying here? What are your must-haves?
Right.
What are your must-have? These are, I can't buy a house without these things. What are and what are would be nice? Why? Because then that, if you stick to that, which most people do not, if you stick to that, it significantly reduces the number of properties that you'll be looking at.
Correct.
You won't be on some of those pages on Zillow. You won't drive through some of those neighborhoods if you know, well, I can't afford anything here anyway. But what often happens is you overextend yourself. You get a little bit outside of what you were planning, and you spend more, or you compromise something that you weren't necessarily wanting to compromise, and that has the potential to put you in a tricky situation later. We're seeing a lot of people now with the pandemic that compromised on that extra office, on that backyard, on the extra space for one of their children, and now they're having to sell homes, or they're in tighter situations
Right.
because now I have to work from home.
Right.
I have 7 people in my house that all need to be on Zoom at the same
Right,
time,
right.
and they need quiet places,
Right.
and I settled for one less bedroom. So making sure that you're clear on what you want, but just as clear on why you want it, so that when you're making those decisions, and if you do decide to compromise on something, you know what the ramifications of that compromise could be further down the road.
And you know what your compromises are prior to going into the deal. So
Exactly.
whether or not you want a pool or you don't want a pool may not be as important as what schools are in the area, right?
Exactly.
So that's a very good point, and good comparison to relationships as well. I like that. Mr. Felton, should someone make a big purchase while searching for a home?
You know, it's interesting. I encourage, and I stress this throughout the process. You know, there's certain things that you should not do when you're making a purchase. You know, I say, you know, don't apply for any new credit. You know, don't, and it's interesting enough, a lot of borrowers take for granted the actual paper trail of the funds used to purchase the home.
Wow.
So when we talk about making deposits and cash deposits,
Correct.
anything over $300, you got to be able to document that. So when we talk about making major purchases, to answer your question, no. You know, you definitely don't want to go out and buy the new car. And regardless if they say to you, hey, you know what, this is a deferred payment, no payments for 2 years or what have you, you do not want to go out and apply for any new credit. You definitely don't want to make any new purchases. Also, you want to be able to document all of the funds used in the transaction. You know, so a lot of points, we have situations where borrowers are able to purchase a home, or they may have the capital, have the funds to purchase it.
Right.
However, it's not documented.
Right.
You know, maybe they have the funds at home, or maybe they're going to get funds from a gift donor. You know, what's interesting in that is with lending now, everything as of the 9/11 Anti-Terrorism Act, all funds have to be documented. So even if I'm getting a gift from a family member, that family member needs to be willing to provide me a source of funds for that gift. And that's interesting. You know, it's one thing when I say to you, Commissioner, I need a gift. You're my brother. You know, you're going to give me a gift. But when I say to you, Commissioner, I need your bank statement also. That brings a different dynamic to the equation. You know, so, you know, those are things that borrowers need to be educated upon. The process in terms of if my mom is going to be able to give me a gift, do they have the funds in the bank? It's not a situation where they have the funds, but it's not in the bank, so they'll go and put the monies in the bank and then issue the gift. That won't work in a normal transaction. So when we're talking FHA, when we're talking conventional or VA funding, all funds used in the transaction have to be documented. You do not want to apply for any new credit because, of course, that can impact your debt-to-income ratio.
So should anyone be signing for anyone's car purchase as well during that time when they're trying to purchase their own home? Should they be serving as a co-signer on anyone's loan? If they have great credit, should they be doing that?
Not at all. I say that when we talk about co-signing, when we talk about co-borrower, the crux of the matter is you are equally responsible.
Okay.
So should that debt go bad, it's your response just as much as your responsibility as it is the borrower's. So definitely you do not want to commit to any other obligations that you cannot, afford to pay, or that will impact your potential of, getting this wealth of owning a home. So definitely I encourage it, not to co-sign, not to go out and apply for any new credit, not to make any larger financial transactions, and also, manage your process. You got to manage this process throughout, from beginning to end, because I've had people that have gotten to the closing table and thought that, oh, you know what, I bought this car last night because the guy told me that it wasn't going to show up on my credit. And then the lender, prior to closing, they did a pull, and now you have an inquiry which triggered now, hey, what was this? You have to explain it, and now you have to say, oh, you know what? I thought this car wasn't going to appear. Yeah, it didn't appear, but the inquiry appeared, which then raised the question that, hey, is there some form of undisclosed debt that you don't have?
Exactly.
And now that just blew up the whole transaction.
Wow. That is some key information that we needed to hear about. So if you're about to purchase a property, or you're in the market for purchasing a property, make sure you monitor your credit and make sure you don't make any big purchases, because you want to make sure that your credit profile remains the same throughout the process and there's not any big changes. Listen, there's so much we can go over when it comes to purchasing a home. And that's the reason why, Mr. Felton, you have the class and you have the workshop and the program to get people ready, because this is not something that in an hour or in 2 hours we can cover every aspect of home ownership and purchasing a home. So I do encourage you guys to use the resources available to you, which we will be posting on not only our social media and our website, but also as part of this video, resources are being posted and are available to you. So please make good use of it. We're coming to a close. I want to give each of you gentlemen, first of all, I want to say thank you for joining us and putting together this housing workshop. I want to give you guys a minute each to kind of tell us a little bit about how people can get in touch with you, and if there's any final words that you want to say, to go ahead and say it. Mr. Crawford?
Well, again, thank you so much, Commissioner. I'm glad to be here. Always happy to share information about the value and the importance of being an educated home buyer. If you want to reach me, I am on Instagram at They Call Me Mr. Crawford. And my website is blackluxurymiami.com, or you can reach me directly at 305-767-3182. So looking forward to helping increase the home ownership rates here in South Florida.
Thank you so much, Mr. Crawford. And Mr. Felton?
You can reach us at www.ercchelp.org. Also, you can call our office directly at 305-652-9393. In addition to homebuyer education workshops, we provide post-purchase workshops. We provide financial literacy workshops for adult and children. And so if you're in that home and if you've purchased this dream, another thing that we want to focus and really pay close attention to is sustaining that home.
Right.
So given that we've had a shortage in a lot of individuals, their financial situations have changed as a result of this COVID, we don't want you to lose that property. So we provide loss mitigation counseling. We work with you and your lender to not just help you to get that home, but to sustain that home and to keep the wealth that you've made the sacrifice to get.
Thank you so much, Mr. Felton. Once again, I want to thank my colleagues here in the city of North Miami Beach, our elected officials, our mayor and commission, as well as all of our staff that put this together. And we want to thank everyone for joining us once again on this workshop that we're having on housing. And it's a lot of great information that we shared with you today. And we hope that you use it and use the resources that are available to you. A special thank you to our staff, especially Jasmine Rivera for helping us organize this workshop, and Gary A. Films for their production services. We ask that you please, once again, make use of these resources prior to purchasing a home and make sure you surround yourself with the right professionals so that you can purchase your dream home and stay in your dream home. God bless you and be safe.